In this video, we're going to be looking at rules and in a lot more detail than we did in the last video. So we're in a custom game here. We're going to click settings and we're going to go to workshop. Within this, we're going to press the plus button just like last time. And the first thing I want you to notice is the fact that here we can actually name our rules. In Overwatch game modes, you're going to have a lot of rules that do lots of different things. So naming them appropriately is really important. For this example, I think what we should do is we should have a game mode in which when a player earns an elimination, they get a slight speed boost. This is very easy to do. Let's name our rule speed boost. I will say that these names have no impact on the game mode functionally. You can name it whatever you want. This is just for you to remember what the rule does. So within the rule, in this dropdown, we have a bunch of events. In the last video, I told you that these events correspond to when this rule is called, and that's right. However, it goes deeper than that, and you'll see that there's lots of different events, and some weird ones like subroutine and ongoing, and we're going to explain what these do. But to begin with, let's do player earned elimination, since that relates to the game mode we're looking at. So when a player earns an elimination, we want to give them a speed boost. So let's go to our actions. Let's search for speed. Set move speed. That's what we want. You'll notice that we have a bunch of parameters, and all of these actions that you can do have different parameters. In this case, you'll see if we hover over the player, you'll see a tooltip pops up. The player or players whose move speed will be set, and we want this to be the event player, or in other words, the player whose this event refers to. Remember, this will be called on any player who earns an elimination, so we want this specific player to get the speed boost. So we're going to set the speed boost to be on the event player. So the event player is something that you'll be using a lot. So remember event player. It's a keyword that you're going to use a lot. It's always the player that the event refers to. Then we're going to set the move speed to say 150%. This is a move speed percentage. It's the percentage of raw move speed to which the player or players will set their move speed. So this is perfect. So now when a player earns an elimination, they'll get a speed boost. To get an elimination, we need some players here, and unfortunately, I don't have any friends, so let's go to add an AI. The AI can be whatever. There's a bunch of different ways to add an AI, actually. You can add dummy bots in the actual workshop code, but we'll cover that in a separate video. The easiest way is to just click the Add AI button in the top corner. I'm just going to add an AI, beginner tank, whatever, but let's change the game mode, first of all, to deathmatch. This is very easy. Let's just turn all of these off. And there we are, deathmatch, and it's just me and this tank on the workshop expanse. This is fine. So what should happen is when I kill this character, we should get a speed boost. Let's see if that's true. So I'll just pick Hanzo here. They're on the Zarya. Oh my god, if I can hit my shots. And there we go. I've got a bit of speed boost here. This is a lot faster than I would normally run. So we can see that that works, but sometimes this isn't enough for us. Sometimes we need more control over what we can do within the game mode. And this is where conditions come in. So let's take a little bit of time to talk about conditions. Conditions are logical statements that check whether certain conditions in the game are true or false, and they allow you to control the flow of the game using this. So what do conditions look like? Well, conditions are made up of three things. You'll have your first value, you'll have your second value, and between them, you've got some symbols, and these symbols are called operators. Let's take a closer look into these operators and how they work and what they mean. So the first operator is the double equals operator. Now, the double equals operator checks to see if the first value and the second value are equal. So if our first value was 100 and our second value was also 100, the value 1 equals value 2 would always return true. However, if the numbers were different, it would return false. Conversely, our second operator is the exclamation mark equals. Now, this operator means not equal to. So if our value 1 is not equal to value 2, then it would return true, if that makes sense. So it checks if the two values are different. The third operator is the greater than symbol. It's an arrow pointing to the right. This checks if our value 1 is bigger than value 2. So for example, if it is a higher number than value 2, the statement would return true. And then, again, conversely, the next operator is the smaller than symbol, which is just a symbol pointing to the left. If value 1 is smaller than value 2, then this whole statement will return true. And then you have these two symbols. You have an arrow pointing to the right and an equal sign. Now, this is the greater than or equal to symbol. So not only does it check if the value is bigger than the second value, it also checks if it's equal to as well. So for example, if a value 1 is 100 and value 2 is 100, the greater than or equal to symbol would return true, because that operator is greater than or equal to. And in the same way, the smaller than or equal to sign works exactly like that. So now we know how operators work. We can apply this to our game mode. Let's say we want to compare or check if a player health is lower than a certain amount. We can do that. So let's hop into the workshop and see how we can check for that. Right, so here we are back in the workshop, and there's a few things to note here before we can start working with conditions. The first thing is learning when rules trigger. Rules will trigger when all of the conditions are true, however, only once. Now, we'll talk about this more in detail afterwards. But first of all, let's change this game mode to make it so that we only get a movement speed bonus if we are lower than 100 HP instead of earning an elimination. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our events, and we're going to select ongoing each player. What this means is that it's constantly going to check for each player, it's constantly going to check whether all the conditions are true. If all the conditions are true, it will run through this rule once. So the next thing is to press the plus button on the conditions. Here you'll see we've got our first value, we have our second value, and we have our operator that we talked about. In our case, we want to check whether a player is lower than 100 health. And if they are, we'll give them a speed bonus. So we're going to look for player health. I believe it's called health. Yeah, that's right. So health of the event player, as before, we're using the event player tag. And we want to check if it's less than or equal to the number 100. In the next video, we're going to be looking at variables, and we'll be looking more about what this number means. But whenever you're working with a raw number, you'll use this number value. And we want it so that it's when it's less than or equal to 100 health. What we imagine this will do is that when we launch into the game, if we are lower than 100 health or equal to 100 health, we will get a speed boost. So let's test this and see what happens. Right, so we've loaded into the game. Let's test it. And if we look down, you'll notice that we actually do have a bit of a speed boost already. And that's odd because I'm not lower than 100 HP. Why might this be happening? Well, it's actually because of how the workshop works. The reason that we have a speed boost straight away is because we have launched into the game, and before we spawn in, we haven't selected a character. When we haven't selected a character, the game will automatically set our HP in the internal code to 0. And what this means is before we've even selected a character, this rule has triggered. Well, how do we fix this? Well, we want this to only trigger after we have spawned. So we're going to go here. We're going to create a new condition that checks if we've spawned. And to do this, we'll use the has spawned value. We're going to check if the event player has spawned, and we're checking if this here is equal to true. So now the conditions we're checking for are where the health is less than or equal to 0 and that the player has spawned in. So now this rule will only trigger if both of these conditions are true. And you can keep stacking conditions to make them more and more specific if you want to. So let's restart our game mode and give this another try. Right, so we've loaded in here. And now when we move, you'll notice that we're moving at a normal pace. This is the normal walking speed of Overwatch. If I hit myself a few times to damage myself, 160, 120, notice that now I'm at a normal walking speed. And if I hit myself, I'm now moving a lot faster. So our rules are working. Now, you'll notice that earlier I said that if all of these conditions are true, this rule will run only once. Now, this is a really important distinction because a lot of people will have trouble with this, especially if they come from a programming background. You would expect that if all the conditions are true, that this rule would just keep working and it would keep being called, but that's not how the workshop works. And to show this, we'll use this example. Let's say if a player is alive, we give them 100 health. What we can do, let's remove these conditions here. Let's go alive. So we can use the is alive value, and we're going to check if the player is alive. And if they are alive, we'll be generous and we'll give them 100 extra armor. So we do this by going here, health, and we can add health pool to player, and we can add armor or health or shields. We'll give them 100 extra armor, for example. Is this recoverable as well, and so on. We don't care, we'll leave this like this. So what this is saying is that if the player is alive, we'll give them 100 extra armor. If this rule constantly was run while the player is alive, the player would have infinite health. They just keep gaining 100 health. But that's not how this works, so I'll show you how this actually works by restarting the game mode. Here we are in Havana, and we notice that Farah has 100 extra health. So the rule was only called once. It's not constantly being called while the condition is true, because this condition is true this whole time. If I die now, this might take a second because I've got armor, but yeah, if I die, we'll notice something very strange happen. Right. When we respawn now, have a look at the health value that Farah will be at. So now she's on 400 HP. Now, the way that the Overwatch workshop works is that these rules will trigger only once when these conditions are true, and then if the conditions change, i.e. in this case, this becomes false, so she dies, and then she respawns, so she's alive again, this becomes true again and runs again. So what does this tell us? Well, each rule will only run once when the conditions are true, and if the conditions change and then become true again, it will run again. And that's a comprehensive breakdown as to how rules and conditions work in Overwatch.